Cool. Looks like we are live based on some folks joining down in the bottom there. So
All
we'll
right.
we'll give it a few minutes here. Let some more folks join in. And in the meantime, Mark, how have you been? What are you excited for this season? It is coming very quickly, and you've got a pretty exciting hunt coming up soon, don't you?
Yeah, it's with today being the first, it's feeling very real. But yeah, later this month headed to Alaska to pursue sheep for the first time. Um, yeah, I'm still not sure what to make of that opportunity. It definitely kind of feels surreal, but now that it's like in the month that it's happening, it's like, oh no, it's here. So
It's
it, you know,
happening.
as Dylan working for a company in the industry, it's like so busy through the summer helping everybody else get ready that sometimes your own preparation can fall on the back burner. So
Yeah,
thankfully
that
a lot of previous years to fall back on and just lean on that experience a lot.
Yeah, that's one nice thing is once you're dialed, it just kind of trickles from year to year and you don't have to completely regroup every year essentially. But um that was going to be my follow-up question is are you ready? Like it's August 1st. I'm a month out from my first hunt and I don't feel ready. I mean, it's like you said, you have some stuff dialed, your bow's shooting good. Like if it started tomorrow, I would be ready, but I don't feel fully prepared.
Yeah, no, that's always the case. Yeah, to not feel fully prepared. I don't think you can, like, right? Hunting's hunting. You never know exactly what animals are going to do, weather's going to do. You don't know what all the variables are going to be and how to fully prepare for everything. But honestly, that's what makes it great too. But especially for a trip like this, something I've been to Alaska more than a handful of times, but never to this area, never hunted sheep, and like just the unknown big adventure aspect of it that I'm can't be prepared for is what makes me excited too, right?
Yeah.
So let's go up there and see what happens.
I'm really jealous and excited for you and eager to hear how that hunt goes. Are you going to film it or anything, or I'm sure you'll write an article or something?
Yeah, we'll obviously
Uh,
talk about the podcast a bit. I'll probably end up writing about it a bit, whether how that gets published or not. Like I don't know. And then yeah, it's very last minute. We've talked about filming it kind of with Justin, like we did for my goat hunt last year. And he basically has the time set aside, but he's kind of on the mend physically a little bit. And this is obviously all sheep hunts are physical, but this one's a true like walk-in sheep hunt. We're not flying, no cubs, so it's going to be a ton of miles, and still really just feeling he's kind of recovering for some stuff on can he actually go or not. So
yeah,
not sure
totally.
if it's filmed or not.
Yeah,
It'll be
that's definitely one huge aspect to staying and keeping in shape for opportunities that come up like this. Had you not been in shape and this opportunity landed in your lap, it would be like, I don't know if I can do it.
a
But
big step.
anyways, no, that's super exciting, man. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and we'll just kind of dive into this here. So
Good.
um yeah, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time out of their evening tonight. I'm personally really excited to talk to Mark here. I've known Mark for a handful of years, super knowledgeable when it comes to all things backpack hunting. Um, I've been fortunate enough to sit in on some of the other discussions that Mark and Steve at EXO have given and presentations, and I know I've personally learned a lot of things from it. And every time you guys talk, it seems like I pick up new tips and tricks and things to try out each year. So I'm excited for this. And yeah, just want to thank everybody for taking time out of their evening. I have a couple of really quick points to cover, and then I'll kick it over and we'll dive into this. So um, one of the things is don't worry, your audio and video are actually turned off. So a lot of folks ask us, can you see me? Can you hear a side conversation? All that's turned off. So don't worry about that. Another thing is it is August 1st right now. So if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, the giveaway is closed. Sorry, you have to be here in person to take full advantage of that giveaway. And then to use that chat function, let us know where you're tuning in from, chat amongst yourself, ask questions, whatever. But as far as like Q&A, actual questions that you want Mark or myself to answer, make sure you're using the Q&A function and not the chat. So we will be using the chat to throw in the links, as Mark and I are discussing anything that's relevant with a link. We'll be using it for that. And then final thing here, if you have like a onX account question, hey, my email's not working, anything like that, I need a password reset, just shoot our customer service an email, help@onxmaps.com. That's going to be a lot better way for us to answer your questions there. So with that being said, I will kind of kick it over. And Mark, if you want to introduce yourself and a little bit of backstory about EXO.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so as the slide says, I just grew up as a Midwest whitetail hunter. Essentially, when I got out of school, high school and college, having grown up hunting in the Midwest, I always thought about, kind of dreamt about hunting out west, and got out of college and just kind of realized, hey, if I just keep talking about doing this, I'll probably keep talking about doing this for decades. I just need to commit and go do it and make it happen. And so I said, I'm doing it this year, archery elk hunting, let's go, figure it out. It was a backpack hunt. I had backpacked before and I had hunted before, but I had never combined those two for a backpack style hunt. And went to Colorado and got my butt kicked and did a lot of things wrong and had a great time, and then committed to, I want to do this every year, at least once. So that's kind of how things started for me. It was pre onX. It was pre all of the great resources we have now with, Elk 101 and all these different things. It was just a lot harder to learn back then. It was before podcasts and all that. So it just, it was a longer learning curve back then. But since then, have just done a lot of trips on my own. Eventually, through writing, met some people in the industry that eventually led to me meeting Steve, who is the owner of EXO Mountain Gear. I met him before he started EXO, and we were kind of friends, and I helped him on the side with some other stuff, business-wise and tech-wise. And I remember him telling me one day, it's like, hey, we're going to start a pack company. I need a website and this and that. And I helped him do all that in the beginning. And then over time, just basically came on to EXO full time. So it's been a wild ride, but yeah, we started in 2014 is when EXO was started by Steve and Lenny. And ever since then, it's just been a lot of learning and growth and excitement. And we make pack systems specifically for backcountry hunting, not necessarily backpack hunting. That is what we do. That's what we love. But we still make day packs. And for us, we just want to make a pack system that is simple and versatile and durable, something that is light, but that's also obviously strong enough to carry out the heavy loads at the end of a successful hunt. So that's what we do. We make them all in the US, which we're super proud of. So that's a bit about myself and EXO.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to chime in here for just a second because Steve, Mark, everybody at EXO is very humble. So I'll brag about their packs a little bit for them above what you guys would do. So I've used EXO for a handful of years. I've used a number of other packs as well. Nothing against the other pack systems, but the EXO, especially the new one, the K4, it is like, it's a game changer. It's just like becomes part of your body when you're using it. So if you haven't already, I will shameless plug EXO, check it out, buy one, try it. You will definitely not regret that decision. So with that said, we'll dive into some agenda.
Customers, Dylan.
Yeah, so that was actually a really cool thing. So I'll touch on that really quickly. So the K3, I have a pretty unique, like I don't even know, back, I guess, a unique body structure type. So I had a few minor issues with heavy weight, like elk quarter pack outs with the previous version. And one of the really cool things is that I was able to test the K4 because of that. And I know they took what I had to say, which I'm just another pack user, but all of their customers helped shape what the K4 is today. And then to see that and to use it and pack out an elk last year with the K4 and see like those drastic improvements was pretty awesome to see firsthand. So yeah, they definitely listened to their customers, me being one of them. So that was pretty cool to see.
So agenda tonight, if we talk about backpack hunting, I could literally talk for hours and hours and hours. And part of what I wanted to do is cover some stuff, but also get to the questions that you guys have. But I did want to just kind of cruise through an agenda and talk a little bit about why backpack hunting, especially for folks who are new to the concepts. I wanted to talk about how it goes wrong. Sometimes I think it's helpful not just to talk about, hey, here's the right way to do something or the best way to do something, but to almost start with, here are the mistakes, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the low-hanging fruit, is let's prevent people from making some mistakes versus just telling them what to do. And then, yeah, we'll touch on kind of how to get started. This idea of a backpack hunt breakdown is something new we've been talking about internally and through our podcast this year, and it's been really helpful. And then we'll just give you guys some resources and dive into some Q&A and a giveaway.
Yeah, definitely stick around for that, for the giveaway. We're gonna do the giveaway before the Q&A, so yeah, hopefully we'll answer a bunch of questions of your guys's, but definitely stick around for that giveaway. We're gonna be doing some onX merch and then a cool gift card from XO, so stay tuned there.
Yeah. So why backpack hunting? This is somewhat personal to me, but as I sat down to think about it, like, why do I love backpack hunting so much? Why is it my preferred way to hunt? It really came to me that it's about the three things you see. It's about the experience, it's about efficiency, and it's about opportunity. To touch on that last one first, on opportunity, some guys may think, hey, I want to backpack hunt because I am gonna get further than everybody else. I'm gonna have the whole wilderness to myself. I'm gonna have, no hunting pressure and these wild animals that are just running around everywhere. And then a lot of guys are bummed when they realize that that's not the case. But there are unique opportunities that you can have as a hunter if you are willing to backpack hunt. And mentioning that, like, what is backpack hunting? It can be defined different ways and you can do it different ways. There's no single way to do it. But when we talk about it, we're talking about taking your pack and everything you need to live in the mountains, the backcountry, the wilderness for however long you want to go. Maybe it's one night, maybe it's 10 nights. And just being fully self-sufficient with what you can carry on your back and living out there. So you're carrying all of your food and shelter, clothing, hunting gear, optics, all that stuff with you. And doing that. So going back to experience, for me, that's why I love backpack hunting so much. I've done it now a ton, different states, different species, different times of year and seasons. And literally every time I'm coming out and finishing a hunt, whether it was successful in filling a tag or not, every single time I'm just so thankful to have the experience, because it's about the hunts, but it's about the places you see. It's about the experiences you have. It's about waking up out there and just really being 24/7 present in the wilderness and focused on chasing some cool animals. So to me, the experience is just tough to beat. And then just real practically, I think it is worth mentioning, like, the efficiency of it. It's one thing to hunt from the trailhead or hunt from your truck or hunt from a base camp, and sometimes that's the right play to make. But sometimes in certain seasons or places, there's just nothing better than being mobile and staying with the animals or putting on miles till you find animals. And hey, I found a herd of elk. I don't have to go back to camp now. I can camp right here with these elk tonight, wake up, hopefully they're there in the morning. And so from an efficiency standpoint, a lot of guys think that it's really complicated to backpack hunt, or, it's inefficient because you have to carry all this stuff. But as we'll talk about, if you do it smart, it actually can be very, very efficient to go backpack hunting. So to me, those are three big things, kind of like why I love to backpack hunt for sure.
Yeah, I would definitely echo all of that, especially the experience for me. Personally, I 80+% probably am day hunting or from a pickup or etc. But the times that I have backpack hunted, like you said, I remember one from last year very vividly. We did not see or hear an elk, but it was, the experience was so cool that at the end of that, of course, we wish we had gotten into a bunch of screaming bulls and had this, cool elk epic pack out with a big 6 point rack. But like the experience alone from what I gained on a personal and hunting, like as a hunter level from that hunt, was a success. Like had we have been hunting from the pickup or a motel room or you name it, it would not have felt as much of a success at the end of it. So I think it's some of those hardships, and especially if you haven't done it, like even a one night like overnight trip, at the end of it you feel really accomplished. It's pretty cool thing to go do. So um I can definitely echo that experience portion.
Yeah. So as I said, let's talk about how it goes wrong. Sometimes the best things you can learn are not someone telling you what to do right, because sometimes you don't comprehend, well, why is that the right thing? But I think if we talk about some of the ways it goes wrong, it's going to be pretty easy for us to understand. And really, I kind of kept it in these three categories. So with experience, like sometimes you just have the wrong goals, meaning when you backpack hunt, as you just said, Dylan, it is about the full experience. It's about the place. It's about just being out there and not just focused on filling a tag. So if you just go into it with the wrong goals, or if you're going into it with a mindset, like I said before, of, hey, I'm going to have the wilderness to myself. There's going to be animals everywhere. I'm going to, go where no one else has gone. This is going to be great. The weather is going to be perfect. The sunrise is going to be excellent. Like, you just have to know what you're getting into and make sure you're doing it for the full experience, kind of the good and the bad, and have good goals. And then right along with that, you just have the wrong focus. Like when you go on a backpack hunt, of course it is a hunt, so your goal is to fill your tag. But as you were talking about, Dylan, like there's so much more like personal accomplishment that you can take out of a trip. And so if you go into it with a focus of, hey, here's what I want to do for the first time ever. I want to go out on my own. Maybe it's like your first solo trip. Maybe you're with some guys, but it's your first time staying out overnight. Maybe it's your first time, carrying everything with you and doing that and realizing what that's like. Like make your focus on setting like mini milestones, and of course try to fill your tag, but like make sure that you have some goals and some focus on achieving other things. And then along with that, of course, is just mindset. When I say that, the wrong mindset, it encompasses everything I just mentioned, and more. I mean, I've personally learned over the years that mindset is everything, and you just have to be able to take the good with the bad. I look at that photo that's next to these slides, and that was day 8, I think, on a 9-day backpack hunt that I did this last fall for mountain goats in Alaska. It was the last full hunting day, and it started off beautiful, like gorgeous in the morning. And we had about 2 hours of hunting time. And then the ceiling just dropped, and we spent the entire rest of the day in the clouds like that. And it was my last full day to hunt and try and fill this tag, and just spent it in the clouds. And so at that point, I like had to choose in my mind, like, is this day worthless? Was my trip ruined, etc.? Or is there something I can take out of this experience as a whole, to find satisfaction in it? So mindset is just so key. When it comes to efficiency, I talked about how a lot of guys think that backpack hunting may not be efficient because you have to carry so much weight and all that. And really that boils down to, once you simplify a system and know what you do need to backpack hunt and what you don't need, it really is very efficient. And I will say that, over time and with experience, you can narrow down your pack weight without being too minimal and while still being comfortable, to a place where I can think of a hunt I was doing last October for elk. And we were somewhat backpack hunting, but it was tougher hunting, and we were trying to stay mobile. And there was a day where we were going into a new spot, and it was like, hey, maybe we are just going to hunt this spot today. But because we are so efficient now with backpacking gear, we were able to go in And we carried camp and we're ready to backpack hunt for that day, but our packs were still relatively light. It didn't weigh us down. We moved well. So, as you learn what you do need and what you don't need, you're efficient. And that really begins with making sure you don't pack your fears. And we can talk more about that. Another lesson I've learned the hard way is, yes, you do need to hunt hard, but you really need to hunt smart as well. And so sometimes doing the hardest thing isn't the smartest thing. And sometimes you do need to make sure you are intentionally staying efficient with how you are conserving your energy, with how you're covering and moving in terrain, that you're using ridge systems to your advantage. You're being smart about how you cover all this ground that you have access to as you're hunting, and not just putting your head down and quote unquote hunting hard or just hiking yourself to death. And then to go along with that, you do need to be physically prepared, especially if you are going on, multiple days. It's pretty easy to go out for an overnight and to feel pretty good on the next day, or maybe even to feel good on day 3. But let's say you're looking at doing a 5-day backpack hunt for the first time, or even longer. Being both physically prepared and then pairing that with being efficient with not carrying too much stuff and then moving effectively over the course of those 5 days is going to make a massive difference. So again, those are some of the things that, I've done wrong in the past, is just packing my fears, not moving efficient, not being as prepared as I should be, things like that. And then opportunity. So we talked about how, backpack hunting doesn't create always a magical opportunity to get away from everyone else or to find all of the animals or the best trophy quality or whatever. Sometimes with backpack hunting, the biggest mistakes I see and I've personally made in the past is actually going too far, right? Sometimes you're hiking through really good huntable country that holds animals just because you think, hey, I need to go deeper than the next guy. I need to not be a mile from the truck. I need to be 3. And then it's like, no, I don't need to be 3. I need to be 5. And so you just play that game where sometimes you go too far. It's easy to find yourself sometimes backpack hunting. I've done this where I'm like, no one's willing to hike here. I'm going to get here. And then you get there and you realize there's an outfitter with a drop camp with horses, for example. So backpack hunting doesn't always mean going as far as you possibly can. And then also a big way that opportunity is wasted is you have committed to go somewhere, but you stay too long. So if you're not finding fresh sign, you're not finding animals, if it's September and you're hunting elk and you're not hearing any bugles, for example, sometimes you feel like, hey, I committed to hike in here. I should stay here. I should hunt here. And sometimes persistence pays off. But I think by default, sometimes we have that sunk cost fallacy where we think, I've already invested so much in this spot, I better stay and get something out of this. And you're not being self-aware enough to go, this is not working. The animals aren't here. The action's not here. If I stay here, maybe I'm just staying too long. And so again, that's just a mistake to be aware of. Don't be afraid to go in somewhere a few miles, stay a night or 2, and then go, nope, let's go on. Let's go to plan B. Let's get to the next spot. It's not wasted effort if you're moving to have a better chance of finding animals. And then just wasting too much time. I've, again, been there, done that. This comes in many different forms. Sometimes wasting too much time is, just not hunting, just being out there, but you're not putting yourself in a good position, especially midday, right? Like guys talk about hunting the prime time, those morning and evening hours. In particular, when you're backpack hunting, you could be getting close to that bedding area. You could be getting on elk midday or even deer, for example. If it's spring bear, be hunting all day. So it's just a matter of staying out there, staying in the game mentally and physically to be present, not wasting too much time. And then another way guys waste time is, and we'll talk a bit about this, is you just don't know your gear. So when it comes to backpack hunting, if you're carrying too much stuff and you're making things too complex and you are maybe carrying good gear, but you're not familiar with it, you end up wasting a lot of time getting out there and you're not familiar with setting up your tent enough or tearing it down, or you're not as familiar with how to make my meals at night or in the morning, or I'm not familiar with how to deal with bad weather. So there's all these ways where if you're not efficient with your time, that may sound like a small thing, but you put all that together and it really adds up. Whereas once you have some experience and familiarity, you can hunt very efficient, not waste time, and really get the everything you can out of those daylight hours. Again, that doesn't mean you're always hiking or hunting hard every daylight hour, but you're in the hunt and giving yourself an opportunity. So those are some of the mistakes that, again, I've made personally, and just with talking with customers and guys through our podcast that I see guys talk about over and over again in ways that they've done stuff wrong.
Yeah, no, those all definitely ring home. And I think I've personally made every one of these. And I do think for me myself, like I learn way more from my mistakes than I do my successes. It's easy to go on a hunt and be like, oh sweet, I filled a tag. Like, that's cool. But what did you really learn from that? Where if you go on a hunt and it's super hard, like I remember it's burned into my brain several different times. One in particular where at night, just like you said, we pinpointed on the map, it was like 4.5 to 5 miles down this trail where we were going to set up a spike camp. And we started hiking at like midnight. We were going to get there, set up camp, sleep for a few hours, get up. There's going to be bulls screaming everywhere. It was going to be epic. Well, we like half a mile from the trailhead in the dark with our headlamps, we're crossing a meadow and there was bulls bugling in that meadow. And we sat and we talked about it. And it's like, I guarantee you that's a main trailhead. First light, there's going to be guys everywhere hunting these elk. They're going to be pressured. Let's just go to our spot on the map. We're wake up. There's going to be unpressured elk. It's going to be great. We went back there and we did not find an elk in 3 days. And there was multiple bulls right there. We could have, still spike camped right there, woke up, been in elk at first light. So definitely, some of those, and the point here of staying too long, I think it really is beneficial if you have spots A, B, C, D planned out, because then if you're at that first spot and it's not working for whatever reason, if you've already planned out a spot B and C and D on the map or just in your mind or whatever, it's easier to pull the plug, I think, instead of like, well, I don't really have a plan B. This was supposed to be great, so we'll grind it out. So yeah, lots of really good stuff there that unfortunately I've learned the hard way on as well.
Yeah. So yeah, to talk about how to get started, again, we could talk for hours and hours and hours. Wanted to give you guys some big picture stuff, and then we do have some resources we'll share that gets into more nitty gritty. But obviously, if we talk about backpack hunting, if it's not something you've done before, you are going to need to get some gear, right? Like you're going from just your hunting loadout to now I need a shelter, some sort of tent. Now I need some sort of sleeping bag or quilts, some sort of sleeping pad. I need some way to heat water and make food while I'm out there. So there's certainly things you're gonna need, but I will say it's less than you think. And it doesn't have to be expensive. So just, let's start with that. Like it is less than you think. Let's like lower that barrier to entry. And then there are a lot of great gear lists out there. I'll share one of mine as an example, but what I'll say is when you're looking at other gear lists, other things that other hunters do, a lot of times we narrow in on what do they bring, and we get really specific on like, oh, they use this sleeping bag, that must be what I need. What I'll say is pay attention to what people don't bring. And especially if you're new, going back, like you're prone to pack your fears, right? So like, examples I see that all the time is guys will bring an extra pair of pants, for example. Guys will bring 2 or 3 knives. Guys will bring all this extra stuff because they're afraid, and they ask all these what if questions. What if this happens and I need this, that, the other thing? And I'll just say, pay attention to what people don't bring and really begin to ask yourself, if this guy who's backpack hunted in all these places and has this experience doesn't need it, maybe I don't need it. And of course there is, safety precautions, right? Like having first aid or a satellite communicator. There's things we do bring that we hope to never need. But just when it comes to duplicates and extras and how much clothing and all that stuff, pay attention to what people don't bring. And then in terms of gearing up, kind of with budget, prioritize boots and a pack and your sleep system. Especially, it's true for all of us as hunters, whether we're big game hunters or really any kind of hunting. We're putting miles on, right? Like our feet have to be comfortable, we have to be capable to move, but it becomes especially true on a backpack hunt. You start stringing together more miles, more days back to back to back. You have to be in boots that aren't going to tear you up, and you have to take care of your feet over those days. So prioritize that. Prioritizing a pack. Again, I'm not even saying it needs to be our pack, but I will just say a good pack that is functional and comfortable. It's going to carry all you need. It's going to be durable. It's going to have the capability to pack something out if you're successful. And it's going to allow you, because you're going to spend a ton of hours in this thing, it's going to allow you to stay out there for all those days. And then sleep's important, right? And guys vary here and have, different needs and different preferences. But I'll just say that again, over the course of many, many days, sleep is important. So it is one of those things just to find out what works for you. How can you get somewhat comfortable, sleep somewhat well so that you have energy for the next day? So those aren't the only things you need, of course, but those I would say are priorities. And then finally, the best gear, it just isn't always the best, right? If we start getting into backpacking stuff, a lot of times what's really, really expensive is maybe marginally better than what's less expensive. And it's just a thing of weight savings. There's certain categories when it comes to backpacking gear where you can be paying hundreds of dollars to save a couple of ounces. Like both pieces are just as functional. One's just far more expensive because it's lighter, and lighter isn't always better. And obviously if you're on a budget, just don't feel like you need high-end everything. Again, going back to priorities, I think you need good boots, a good pack, a way to get some relative comfort and sleep. And obviously that's a safety factor with shelter. And aside from that, like there's plenty of budget stuff you can do on clothing and all the rest. And we've talked about that a lot on our podcast. So that's a few gear notes. Again, I'll be sharing a gear list here shortly just to give you guys some ideas. This next point's huge. If you want to get started and do a backpack hunt, separate backpacking from hunting. Your backpack hunt should not be the first time you go backpacking. There's so much you can do in the off season when it's not hunting season to get experience backpacking, to test your gear, to build your system, to figure out what shelter you like, to figure out your boots, to learn how to cook and what meals you like, to figure out what you do and don't need. So I know we're talking backpack hunting is one thing, but separate those two, make them something you can do year round, that even when it's not hunting season, I can go backpacking and learn some things. That picture over there on the side is from one of the hikes that we do every year. It's actually called the Death Hike. And I have learned so much on trips and adventures, backpacking and hiking that have made me such a better hunter. And so much of that has happened outside of hunting season. So again, as you start to learn backpack hunting and appreciate it, you're also extending the amount of time you're just going to enjoy the outdoors, because there's so much you can do outside of hunting season. And then even when it comes to gear, you can look outside the hunting world. When it comes to shelters and sleep systems and all of the components you need for backpacking, you don't have to just stay strictly within hunting brands. There's a whole different world out there on backpacking and through hiking and all kinds of stuff that both has gear, but also just a ton of knowledge. So look outside the hunting world, not only for gear, but also for tips and tactics and strategies just for living in the backcountry. Is huge. There's so much to learn out there and to experience out there. And then the final point again is spend time, not money. Let's say you do have the budget for all the best everything. That doesn't mean you're going to be the most capable backpack hunter just because you have the best gear. You need to get out there and spend time, develop the mindset, develop the physical ability, and really develop the knowledge and experience. I've hunted with guys who are far more experienced than me. And then, occasionally now get to hunt with guys who have less experience than me. And it's so noticeable just in the small things, how comfortable someone is, how efficient they are, kind of how dialed their system is, how well they know how to just live out there. Again, going back to, hey, it's night, here's my routine, here's what I do, here's how I'm efficient, here's how I get good rest, here's how I take care of my gear in bad weather, here's how I manage this situation, here's how I avoid this pitfall. So there's just so much that only comes by spending time and getting experience that you just can't buy even with the best gear. So those are some ways to get started. Get the basics, get what you need, but make some priorities. Get out there and get experience outside of hunting season, and then just invest in yourself more than you're investing in gear. And if you do that, you're just going to be so dang dialed when it comes to hunting season and you actually go on a backpack hunt.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I don't do enough is backpack outside of hunting. I would say the majority of my overnight trips are during season, and it's like, you buy a new sleeping, even as small as a new sleeping pad, you
Mhm.
wouldn't think is going to be that big of a difference. And then you're on night two or something, and you're like, man, this is not. I'm not sleeping as well with this thing. I might have saved 3 ounces, and it looked good on paper, but it's definitely coming at a cost. And had I, or have people go more during the summer, like you're going to figure that out ahead of time. So
Yeah,
definitely personally picked up a good tip there.
yeah, absolutely. So this one, this backpack hunt breakdown, I wanted to mention it. We kind of can't dive fully into it, but as you see, I'm calling it a framework for backpack hunting. And this is something that Steve and I were talking about. We have a podcast called the Hunt Backcountry Podcast, and we were talking about a series we wanted to do this year, and not just tell a hunting story, but really like break down a hunt into key decision moments. And some of those key decision moments have nothing to do with like spotting the animal, pulling the trigger, etc. Again, a lot of times, especially on these adventure hunts, these big hunts, these backpack hunts, key decision moments may be some element of how you survived the conditions, right? Or it could be a gear choice that you made that helped you stay out there. So we were kicking around this idea, and then we just internally were thinking like, what are the big categories that you need to think through for a backpack hunt? And we actually just did a whole podcast series, actually just in July, numerous episodes that we called the Backpack Hunt Breakdown. But we had different guests with different hunts, different species, locations, times a year. And for each of those guests in each episode, we would go through and take one hunt and break it down in these categories of planning, managing, living, hunting, and packing. And as we developed this idea, again, it was us giving categories to what we already know, kind of to what we already do. But I started thinking about it, and it's like these categories are so helpful for me to personally think through, really for every hunt, because sometimes there's going to be a lot of crossover, but there's going to be unique things of, Dylan, we were talking about, I have this sheep hunt coming, and that's in Alaska, and it's a different time of year than, the elk hunt that I'm going to have in October in Idaho, right? So they're both backpack hunts, but they're at a different place, a different time, a different species. And thinking through all of these categories is just really helpful for me to identify like what are the things I need to focus on and think about. So again, under planning, that's like the basics of like, hey, where am I hunting? When am I hunting? What species am I going to hunt? How am I going to access this country? All that stuff. Managing is things like we talked about earlier, managing my time, my energy, efficiency. Like, how can I go into this hunt and best manage my time, best manage where I move, how I move to make the most of this hunt? The category of living, again, for a backpack hunt, you're living in the backcountry on your own with whatever you have. So things like, hey, how plentiful is water going to be? How am I going to treat water? Am I going to need to carry a lot of water? Or is there going to be a lot of water for me to frequently get as I need it? food, what type of shelter, because of the conditions, or maybe even the terrain. Sometimes I bring a different shelter just based on the terrain I'm in. And survivability just kind of goes with comfort. But what do I need to actually survive out here? Obviously, the hunting category, that's where we all tend to focus, right? Like locating animals, making the final approach, stalking and shooting and all that. And then a huge, huge category that sometimes when guys have plenty of hunting experience, but are maybe new to backpack hunting, is going back to distance. They might find themselves further from the truck than they've ever been with an animal down. And so thinking ahead of time, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to pack this animal out? What are the weather conditions? Because how much time is that going to give me? Am I going to be battling heat, or is it going to be plenty cold to give me more time? How am I going to care for this meat and cool it? What's going to be the best way to get out of here with these heavy loads? Because maybe it's totally different than the way that I came in. I've been on hunts where you don't hike back to the truck. You hike to a totally different point, stash the meat, get back to the truck, circle around. So just thinking through all that, and then different packing strategies of, am I taking one load all the way out and coming back? Am I moving all the meat and kind of shuttling it to a spot and then kind of making a second leg? So there's just a lot to it when you begin to break that down. And I think this framework, it really was cool in the podcast to break down all these hunts with this framework. But again, having put it together, it's a tool that I'm going to take in every hunt and just like think through each hunt, each opportunity through this framework, and just try and be best prepared as possible. And then the other cool thing is after a hunt to revisit this framework and go, hey, where did I go wrong? Or what could I have done better? Or what could I have learned from this hunt according to these different categories? So I just think this is something that could be very helpful. At least it has been already for me.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so resources, this is probably the fun stuff. I know I've thrown a lot at you guys and we're moving fast, and that's partially just because I want to get to Q&A. But so we talked about gear and gear list. If you just want to get an idea of what I bring, we have all these free resources on our website. Literally, if you just go to exomountaingear.com, under resources, there's these different things. One of them is a gear list template. That'll not only give you an idea of what I bring on a backpack hunt, but you can actually take this template and make a copy of it, and then essentially input your gear and use it for you, right? It's a checklist. If you want to enter the weights of each item, you'll see that I have them on there. It'll calculate your total pack weight. There's different categories on there. There's check marks for like, hey, I'm going to include it for this hunt or not, because sometimes that varies per hunt. You can use it. I use it right when I actually pack up for a trip, of like going down and say, have I packed this thing or not, to help me identify if I'm missing something. I have like pre-trip checklists on there for certain things I need to do. Like, hey, have I downloaded my offline maps in onX, for example? So again, that free gear list template's a great free resource that's out there for you guys. We have a free training plan. So in terms of getting in shape for a backpack hunt, and in particular, if you don't live in the mountains and you also don't want to be in the gym or have gym equipment, this training plan is built to prepare you as best as possible for backpack hunting in the mountains when you don't have access to a full gym and you don't have access to the mountains, and it's free. So check that out. And then our podcast is on there. I mentioned that a time or two. We've been doing that 8 years now. we talk backpack hunting all the time. It's usually not just us. We love to have guests on there. A lot of what I have learned has come from hearing from our guests. And we do Q&As on there and all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't checked out any of those free resources, I just want to make sure that you guys are aware of them. They're free. Go check them out, and they're just all there on the site.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff. We actually just threw the link in the chat there, so link right to it. Make sure you save that, or just remember exomountaingear.com. Pretty easy to find those. One of the things I need to do I've been procrastinating. We talk about season being here is taking your gear list template, and I want to do for myself like, okay, here's my archery elk gear list. Here's my rifle mule deer, because like obviously those things are going to be drastically different. We're talking early to mid September, sometimes 90-degree heat versus like late November for us in Montana with mule deer, snow on the ground. Like you're taking different shelters, different sleeping bags, everything. So, just kind of like, here's kind of my archery elk. And like, depending on the weather, where I'm going, like I will deviate from that. But here's like a template for that. Here's a template for rifle deer. Here's a template for spring bear. And just like, those good like starting points, and then from there I'll be able to say, in my mind anyways, I'll be able to take a look at that and say, okay, spring bear, it's unusually hot or it's unusually cold, or we're going further or we're going closer to the trailhead, and just deviate from that, but have like the main hunts that I do kind of templated out.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. It's cool because you can take one of those and just make a copy of it, rename it, and start tinkering with gear. And I do the same thing. I have archery elk, rifle elk, mule deer, spring bear, different one now for my sheep hunt I'm going on, a different one for
Mhm.
last mountain goat hunt. And it's great to be able to do that and make comparisons.
Totally. And just in the back of my mind, this is what I'm thinking of, and I need to actually put pen to paper with this. But once I go on one of those trips, like come back and take notes on that. Like maybe I say, okay, this is the week of 2023 elk hunt. After I
Mhm.
return from that particular trip, like notes, like I wish I had an extra one more pair of socks. I wish I had a different water filtration system. Like take notes, and then as you do it the following year, it's like, oh yeah, like this is pretty similar to that trip, and I wish that I had brought my heavier sleeping pad because I was there for more days or something of that nature. So like be diligent with your notes. And like I always preach that too with waypoints. Like don't just drop a waypoint in the app. Like take a second, put an actual worthwhile note in there. And that way a year, maybe it's 5 years down the road, you look at that and it spikes you like your thought process. And you're like, oh yeah, maybe I should pack those extra 5 ounces or whatever on this hunt. So I think that'll be cool. Again, these are things that I've been thinking about and I haven't put them into application, but hopefully we'll do that this year. So cool. We'll talk about the giveaway. We'll also post this link in the chat right now. So EXO has been kind enough to donate. They're giving away a $200 gift card for one of the lucky folks on this live webinar. Again, if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, sorry, you're not entered. Don't ask us. Just attend these live, and then you'll have a chance to win these. And then we're also going to give away 10 onX t-shirts. So we will reach out. We'll let you know if you won, what the next steps are. Enter by midnight tonight. It takes 2 seconds. Like we're not going to ask you for much. Just go ahead, click that link and get entered there. So one other thing, a couple other quick things here. So we do have an elite benefit with the folks at EXO. So all onX and elite members, they're offering free shipping for all of their K4 packs. Again, we'll throw that link in there. Truthfully, if you're in the market for a pack, or if you think you might want to check out something, I know these guys do a really good job at hitting as many shows as possible where you can actually put one on with some weight and check it out. But as somebody who has struggled in the past with various packs and whatnot, the new K4 for me is absolutely dialed. And like I said, I would be absolutely shocked if somebody spent their money on it and wasn't completely stoked about it. So check it out, check that link out, and get one. I would say, especially with the pack, but any gear really, try not to get it a week before your hunt. Go on some hikes with it, put some weight in it, throw 60 pounds in it and go on a 2 mile hike and see. Cause I know for me, like I'll do that and then I'll send pictures in to Mark or somebody and say, hey, like I'm kind of like not loving how it fits right here. And Mark's probably like, well, yeah, you're an idiot. Why do you have it? Why do you have it set up that way? But anyways, like it takes a little bit of time to get your stuff dialed, especially a pack when you're looking at packing out weight, hopefully at the end of a successful hunt. So get those orders in now and check that link. One other thing before we jump into some Q&A. So we have a lot of other master classes coming up. So we have one on getting the most out of your elite membership, backcountry meat care with our good friends at Born and Raised Outdoors coming up. Just how to use the app more effectively. We get these questions all the time. Check the link. We'll throw this one in the chat as well. And get signed up for those. Even if you aren't sure if you can make it, or you know you can't, if you sign up for these, what we'll do is we'll email you a copy of it after the fact. We do also put most of these on YouTube as well, so you can find them. But just sign up, even if you're not sure if you can make it. We'll remind you about it, and lots of good information to come. So with that, some questions. Well, I'm going to stop sharing. I know we have a bunch of really good questions ahead of time from everybody attending here. One question that I have, Mark, while I do that, is something I personally struggle with is identifying a good spot to set up camp when I am backpack hunting, or even spike hunting for all that. Maybe I'm walking in X number of miles and I'm putting up my camp, and then I'm hunting out of that camp. I always personally struggle with, okay, like, I know where elk are. I don't want to bother them. I don't want them to, I'm obviously trying not to set up my camp in the middle of an elk trail that they're probably going to use. But even just thermals, and like, is my scent going to bug them in the middle of the night? Am I going to get too close? Am I too far away? Like, what are some things that run through your mind when you're setting up camp? And I guess for this example, we'll just say like archery elk hunting, and where elk are. What are you looking for like, yep, this is a good spot to set up camp?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects of the question. There's what is a good campsite from a livability perspective, right? So things like, hey, how am I going to be sheltered from the wind? Or is this spot going to be prone to condensation or any potential water runoff? So there's like all these practical aspects of, what's the vegetation like? So there's the camp, and then like what you said, like the camp spot in relation to hunting. And so you kind of need to consider both of those a little bit. That is, to be like really honest with you, when we talk about backpack hunting, a lot of times we're not just going in and like setting up this backcountry base camp. So we don't like leave the trailhead with 7 days worth of stuff and then just set up a camp, but we'll hunt with camp on our back every day, and we're just covering miles till we're on elk. And so our camp spots are pretty like on the fly, right? Like, we're going to find elk, we're going to find a place to camp, we're going to throw up our tents quick, we're going to wake up in the morning, break everything down, and keep hunting. And so I would say that a lot of times we're somewhat less strategic on the camp spot and more just concerned with being in the right spot from a hunting perspective. Just to touch really quick on something with that, if you're going to be very mobile and do what I just talked about, things like shelter choice matter a lot, because if you're not going to be near established trails or near established campsites, and you have like, say, this giant floorless teepee, I'm not saying that those are bad shelters, but they need a lot of space to set up, right? Versus like, say, a smaller tent that you can kind of pitch anywhere. So just from a practical perspective, that's one thing that gets overlooked, is the smaller your shelter, the less particular you have to be with campsite selection, right? Just very practically. But in terms of relation to elk, yeah, it's like, here are elk. Maybe I found them that afternoon or that evening, and then my head's just going, do I think they're gonna stay here or move overnight? Like, and again, sometimes we're making educated guesses here, like looking at the country. Obviously, if you have experience in this country, you may know a lot of it better, but just thinking through like food to bed patterns, are they already in a location where I think they're going to be here and feed overnight? Or do I see them moving overnight, for example? And then what does that do to my campsite selection? Let's say you think you're in a spot where they're going to be in that general vicinity overnight. As you said, sometimes thermals may be a factor. So you may want to get yourself just tucked up and over a ridge, so that as cool thermals will fall in the evening, they're falling off the backside and not into the elk, for example. But I think also you would probably be surprised at if you camp with a pretty minimal footprint, and I mean like your sound, even your use of light, things like that. And I'm not saying that I'm overly analytical of every tiny thing, but I think you would be surprised at I've even gone to bed not even thinking I was an elk, but I've woke up an elk, for example, right?
Mhm.
I've woke up with elk 50 yards from my tent that I had no idea were going to be there, for example. So I just think this idea that if you're camped within half a mile or 200 yards of elk, you're going to blow them, just really isn't the case. You know, sure, it may be the case, obviously, if they catch the wrong wind, like even in a hunting scenario, that's the biggest factor is wind. So I just primarily look at that, like thermals, can I protect myself from them? Even things like a creek can overpower like what the typical thermal would be, right? So can I put myself in a position where, like, say you're on a face and the elk are on this side, but you have a stream between you and the elk? Well, any of my scent that's going to theoretically cross across the face to the elk, if that creek is in the middle, it could carry some of that scent down and away, for example. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that go into it. I just think through, are they here? Do I think they're going to be here? And then what is my best chance of not really letting my scent get to them?
Yeah, and I think too, it's just being smart. You're not yelling from one tent to the next, like, "How'd you sleep over there?" Like in the morning. Just be smart. Like there could be elk around, and I think camping next to a creek is one thing that's pretty solid. A for the thermals for the scent,
Mm.
some sound cover as well. Like now, if you're trying to listen to bugles all night, like if you're listening for elk, that might not be the best as well. But I know I personally sleep a lot better when I have some white noise, and like a creek or just something helps me get a better night's sleep as well. But yeah, that's good stuff there. So we have a long list of questions. A lot of these questions we covered, Mark covered at some point during this presentation, but we'll dive into a handful here. This first one, so when hunting solo and taking multiple trips to get meat out, how should I keep the meat at the kill site between trips? Like the first thing I will say is definitely sign up for the Meat Care Masterclass with Born and Raised. Like where the whole hour long class is going to be about meat care. But Mark, do you have any quick tips and tricks with for meat care, getting something knocked down?
Yeah, I think I heard in there, like, how do I keep it at the kill site? And my first thing would be get it away from the kill site. I don't mean by that you need to take all of the meat and pack it out, but just like what we'll call leapfrogging, right? Like the strategy of I'm going to get all my meat from point A to point B, and I still may need to get it, another 3 miles, but get the meat away from the kill site just because there's going to be less chance of encounters with predators, a bit less scent, right, from the carcass that's left behind. You're not going to disturb that area. So I would just look to get it away from the actual kill site. Again, a creek is a go-to for me. If I can find a creek, it's just naturally cooler, period. So if heat is a big concern, just shade and ideally a creek is the main thing. But yeah, get it away from a kill site. I like to, if it gets into like, say you're Montana and bear country, for example, but even outside of brown bear, grizzly bear country, it still can be helpful to put the meat in a place where as you approach it again, you have some visibility to, hey, has this site been disturbed? Or I don't want to accidentally like startle a predator or something like that. So being able to see it as you're approaching it can be helpful. But yeah, I would say get it away from the site. Get it in shade if you can get it. I don't mean in a creek, that would be kind of for extreme conditions, but even near a creek, you'd be surprised at just how much cooler that can be. And then it's just a matter of your pack out strategy. Sometimes you can, especially solo, like leapfrog all of the meat from this spot to that spot, this spot to that spot, versus like taking massive trips in and out. But those are the big things I'd look at.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I personally have learned the hard way from, luckily I didn't lose meat, but just being smart of like, where's the sun going to be? How long am I going to be gone? I remember one time I came back to elk quarters hung in a tree and like the sun was just beating down on it. And had I put it on the other side of the tree, it would have been in the shade. So it's like, sure, it's shaded now, but how long am I going to be gone? And where is this? Where do I think the sun might be while I'm gone? I remember just coming back and being like, duh, like why didn't I think of that, right? So that's another one. But yeah, definitely all good stuff there, and sign up for that masterclass for sure.
Yeah, this doesn't apply to his situation because he said he was solo, but just to like highlight that point, um, there's been years that Steve and I have been hunting elk together. Like one in particular, I killed a bull on opening day, and we essentially packed part of that bull out. But then he had another tag to fill. We knew we were going to keep hunting. And if you find the right spot and have the conditions for it, you can actually leave meat, quite a while, right? So we got it pretty high. It's going to be away from bears. It was high enough in the tree canopy. We knew it would be shaded pretty much in all conditions, and it was near a creek. And we looked at the temperatures and like, we could leave this here for days. And so we actually made a plan of, hey, we're going to make this big route, this circle, and hunt our way back to my meat and end up packing it out. So that's the other thing, just to touch on. If you have multiple tags to fill and the conditions are right, don't always assume, hey, we knocked something down, we have to get all this meat out now. Sometimes it'd actually be worse back at the truck than it would be leaving it hang in the field if you have the right conditions for it.
Yep, yep, totally. Um, what size of a pack would you recommend for a 5 to 7 day?
Yeah, so our K4 5,000, so it's 5,000 cubic inches. With the lid, it's actually technically about 5,600 cubic inches, but it's perfect for 5 to 7 days. It's our most popular model by far, just because of that size versatility. So many guys love to backpack hunt, like myself, but I get it. Not every hunt I do is a 5 to 7 day hunt. I got kids, I got work, I got all kinds of stuff to do, and I'm out day hunting a lot. So being able to have one pack that can span that gap and say, hey, once a year or once every 2 years, I go on this 5 to 7 day trip, I need a pack for that. But I also need a pack that can compress down really well and efficiently and work great as a day pack or even a quick weekend trip. Again, outside of hunting season, maybe just for backpacking or travel or what have you. That K4 5000 just covers that whole wide range so well, and that's why it's our best seller.
Yeah, yeah, I would echo that for sure. I mean, I have the 5,000. That's my go-to, and I've never been at all annoyed that it's too big. Even when I am like 80 to 90% day hunting or just like morning or afternoon hunting, I've never been annoyed about it being too big or bulky. It really sucks down tight. That being said, I did also just get the smaller one, and I am excited for that. Like it's just different uses as well, but for one, I would strongly recommend the 5,000. I've had buddies ask me and say, I just don't do that many. I might do like one overnight trip, but if you might need it, like the 5,000, you're not going to be bothered by it. The other thing I personally do is I typically don't run a lid with it at all. Like that's just any pack. I'm not a lid guy. So I minimize a little bit of size, weight, bulk, whatever you want to call it there. And then if I go on an extended trip, I know I have that to fall back on should I need a little bit more. So, um, yeah, I definitely, as a user, would echo that 5,000. Let's see. What is the best way to store food supply in bear country? Any input on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would draw a big distinction on like brown bear, grizzly bear country versus just country where there happens to be black bears, right? So like where I hunt a lot and say central Idaho versus like the Montana border would be totally different. And then obviously the other thing is now more than ever, beware of regulations. Like in some places, you're going to fall under like a forest district that is going to have mandatory rules on food storage. So if you're just in black bear country, I honestly don't do anything. Period. I used to hang food. I used to carry a sidearm and all this stuff. I just don't. And especially the hunting style of, hey, we're moving and every night we're basically in a different location. I do think it's different to be out on, say, a 5 to 7 day hunt and be in one camp for 5 to 7 nights, right? Like you're creating more of a presence, more scent, more trash, more food, like in a fixed location versus constantly on the move. So that alone is one example. But yeah, I mean, if it was like grizzly bear country, all the precautions you can, of course, like hanging, not only food, but things with other scent, eating away from camp, keeping a clean camp in general. Again, you may fall into regulations of mandatory rules that go follow those. Again, going back to what I talked about with meat, like if I was hanging food in grizzly bear country, brown bear country, I would still want to position it where I can see it as I'm approaching it, so I'm not startling a bear, for example. So those are all the big basic ones that really come to mind. And again, I would say if you're hunting like say Colorado and it's like, yeah, there's bears here, but not grizzly bears. Personally, I'm not saying everyone should do this. I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, one thing that then again, Montana's just different because even 10 years ago, there was like parts of the mountain that there was like black bear country. And then if you go on this side of the mountain, it's grizz country. Now anymore, you see them everywhere. So like I in Montana, unless I'm in like central or eastern Montana, I typically have a sidearm and or bear spray.
Yeah.
But when I am in like most of like the more black bear prominent areas, like it, I usually like take my food and put it 40 yards from the tent, like just far enough that like if a bear did get curious or whatever, like it's not in my tent right next to where I'm sleeping. But yeah, it's not going to hurt to be overcautious. Like it's an added step, but it's definitely not going to hurt to take the right precautions, especially in state like I said, Montana. There's pretty much grizzlies everywhere. Is what I just assume at this point.
Yeah, it's a massive distinction of that scenario versus like, Colorado and just there is bears, right? But the thing to keep in mind with like
Yeah.
black bears in general, they have plenty of food where they're not, it's different if you're camping in an established campground, right? Like that's where you run into the issues where you have bears who are used to people, used to food, used to trash. Like if you're backpacking and in the wilderness where they're not used to that, they're not habituated to it, they haven't had a lot of interactions, you're an unknown threat to them and they don't want anything to do with you. And then even like keeping your food closer to you, you're also like keeping your food where there's like human and unknown scent that could actually like prevent them from wanting to come into camp, right? But again, totally different scenario with grizzly bears in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. Any preferred meat bags? What have you used? What do you like? What do you
Yeah, a bunch. Man, I've used the tag bags, our galley bags, 6 a.m. outdoor bags, the born and raised bags, Graxaw bags. So I've used quite a bit. I will say that for elk in particular, like the born and raised bags that they came out with are phenomenal. It's always a struggle to try and get a big awkward elk quarter into a top entry bag. And if you haven't seen their bags, they basically zip open. They're shaped like an elk quarter. You unzip it, lay it open, set the elk quarter in, fold it back over, zip it up. So if I'm elk hunting, like there's no other way to go, in my opinion. But yeah, for like boned out meat bags, like our galley stuff's really good. On my sheep hunt, I'm taking some of those because I'll be doing all boned out meat, for example. And that's just important to know is like, look at the species you're hunting. And then if you're doing bone in versus boned out, and your meat bag design can either help or hinder you there. And I'm not saying that you can't have a meat bag that is universal, but what I will say is, for example, if you're going to do boned out meat, you buy this giant bag that's built for quarters, you're doing yourself a huge disservice compared to a bag that is more narrow, more cylindrical, and is built for boned out meat. And it's going to keep it more in line and efficient and make the pack easier to load. So there are differences, not only materials, but on like the intended application of a meat bag.
Yeah, definitely. I personally, the two you hit the nail on the head that I use are Gully and the Born and Raised. Um, we do actually work with both our Gully and Born and Raised with our elite program, so we do have discounts to both of those sets of bags there. So check those out if you're an elite member. If you're not, that's just an additional perk to becoming an elite member is saving money on that type of stuff. But I've used a lot of them as well, and I've used literally everything from a pillowcase when I was younger. Like we used to take old pillowcases and use those. And I think you hit the nail on the head. If I'm elk hunting, like the Born and Raised ones for sure, I've used those deer hunting as well, and they work phenomenal. Like if you're only gonna have one, like that's a hard pressed one if you're a big time elk hunter. But then the Argali ones are super lightweight, work super well. Like they pack a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. If I'm only deer hunting or boned out, like that's the way to go as well. So yeah, it's good to hear that what I have found is the same as what you found on your end as well. Let's see, a couple more here. So backcountry first aid kit. What are you taking? What are you not? And I know that like that alone could be an hour
Yeah.
conversation. But like, is there some key things you're taking? Do you not take very much? Do you plan for the worst? Like, what do you do? Because I know for me personally, it's a good question that this person asked because there's so many things where it's like you pack your fears, but at the same time, like a tourniquet, for example, most I feel like if I'm going to get hurt in the backcountry or somebody I'm hunting with, most of the time it's going to be a cut from a broadhead or a knife when you're field dressing, or maybe a bullet wound. Like those are the most likely like life threatening situations. So I'm like, man, I should probably take a tourniquet. And then you do that for all these sort of things, and all of a sudden your medical kit is this big and weighs 3 pounds, and you're like, okay, well I don't need all of it, but how do you decide what do you take and not?
Yeah. Yeah, I would answer this question by saying there is what I do versus what I think you should do, and those don't necessarily align. I've gotten away for a long time with carrying less than I should. And it's something that I've realized is a liability, not only for me, but who I'm hunting with. And so it is something that I've been researching this year and changing. We've actually recorded a podcast that's not out yet, but will be out actually this month in August. So I'm not saying this is a pitch, but I'll say if you subscribe to the Hunt Backcountry podcast, you'll hear a phenomenal podcast on it later this month with a guy who is an Air Force PJ, pararescue jumper, which if you're not familiar, they're extremely specialized, high level guys, not only tactically, but in medical care. And this guy was also a hunter and just kind of a backcountry outdoorsman. And so he took all of his like military PJ knowledge, paired it with his firsthand experience of, hey, here's what I know about hunting and what the real risk of injury are in the scenario. And like he helped us develop like some recommendations. And I plan to model more of what I'm doing based on what he recommended. Again, that's all coming. But yeah, I think to your point, Dylan, is like a first aid kit, there's a huge difference between like a boo-boo and something that's life-threatening, right? It's like having a bandage for a cut is great, or some super glue for a deeper cut is great. And having a way to take care of like, say, blisters on your feet is great, right? But that's all different than something like a tourniquet, a chest seal, an airway device, etc. And when you start getting into those other more life-saving devices, potentially life-saving devices, it's again where you have a tool that is only as good as your experience or knowledge on how to use it and how to play it. Or like another thing you'll see with tourniquets are, hey, a guy has one, but it's actually buried way deep in his pack. And literally the difference between life-saving and not with a tourniquet can sometimes be seconds, especially if you have to self-applicate, for example. And so sometimes guys are carrying around tourniquets buried way deep in their pack where they can't access it, or maybe their hunting partner doesn't know where it is. And now it's like, well, really, how good is that tourniquet, right? Because if you need it for a life-saving thing, like potentially when time really matters, you have it, but you don't have knowledge with it. You don't have experience with how to apply it. You haven't practiced with it, and now it's not accessible. How good is it? And honestly,
Yeah.
because of all those reasons, I admit my own weakness and all that is part of the reason I haven't carried it. So not only do I have interest in starting to carry some of that stuff, but I also know that I need to like have some knowledge, experience, etc. So there's obviously a lot of good wilderness first aid courses. There's some good wilderness first aid books. I've learned a lot from like talking with this guy on the podcast and some others. So all that to say it's an area I'm growing in, and it's another area where what you pack is only as valuable as what you can do with it, and knowing
Totally.
when, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm excited for that podcast for sure. And actually last year I was at a course, and a PJ was giving the course, and after that is when I started like, okay, I'm gonna carry a tourniquet. Like Now I have one in my pickup and one in my pack. And because we did use it, like we used it on ourselves, we used it on other people. Like we went through like the quote unquote training, and really it's not that hard to use a tourniquet. And that's just one example of a life-saving device. It's just you have to actually do it, right? Like it's easy to watch a video and be like, oh yeah, no, I got that. That's easy. But you have to actually do it. So it mine is constantly evolving, and every time I pick mine up, I'm like, I know I could save a lot of weight here,
Yeah.
but I don't know if that's the area to do it, and so on and so forth. So I like it. I'm excited for that podcast for sure. Um, couple more questions here. Let's see. Oh, this is a really good one because I struggle with this as well. So, how do you balance minimizing the number of trips? And I think this individual is talking about like packing out an animal. How do
Mhm.
you balance minimizing the number of trips and maximum safety weight carrying capacity for packing out in the backcountry? Is there a formula, recommendations, max amount of weight someone should carry out? Um, and then this individual goes on to say, I know it varies by fitness level, terrain distance, etc. But I do think that that's a very good question because along with several people I know, have pushed it before and said, let's get this out in one because I don't want to come back here. And then you're stepping over logs, or maybe it starts to rain and things become slippery, and you're like, now I'm like risking, blowing a knee out or just being unsafe because we are carrying way too much weight. Is there anything that you found that helps with that decision?
Yeah, I mean, he said the biggest one, right? Like as we talk about this, people are going to have different physical capabilities, different levels of training, different level of fitness, different experience levels with weight, different injuries they're overcoming or prone to, et cetera, right? So there's a huge personal variable here. The two things that I go to after that, like say for me personally, I know what my capabilities are, is what is the terrain like? And then what is my, I don't want to say mental state, but like how rushed do I feel and how tired am I and how confident am I in my decision-making abilities? And those kind of related, but terrain's huge, right? So like, is it 100 pounds, but pretty good trail, mostly, like relatively easy elevation? Or is it 100 pounds with incredibly steep deadfall and it's wet, and I'm not familiar with this country and it's going to be dark soon, right? Like the 100 pounds and 100 pounds, radically different experiences, right? And you need to approach those very, very different. And then to combine with that, but kind of my second point, like more on the mental side of how do I feel right now? Like, am I well hydrated? Am I well rested? Is this the very end of the trip? Am I very fatigued? Because I've noticed even personally, like decision making ability at a macro and micro level, like, am I super stumbly on my feet right now? Am I in a place where I'm really confident in my navigation and decision making? That can also play a factor. So, is there a time when I've gone out really heavy and all that? Yeah, for sure. And it was heavy and it was difficult to do, but I had the conditions to do it and the fitness to do it and the terrain to do it and the decision making to do it. And then there's just been times where it was like, this is not smart. I mean, I've started pack outs with, I don't want to put weight on it because I didn't weigh it because I was miles deep, but what was probably say 120 pounds, and went for a while and then started realizing my physical capabilities weren't great. My decision making and like even foot placement wasn't great. The terrain was tougher than I thought it was going to be. I was off trail and just kind of had to suck it up and be like, as much as I hate doing this, like I need to stop and drop some weight right now and make at that point, we were close to 5 miles from the truck, right? So instead of like one tripping that, had to drop some weight, go that 5 miles, come back 5 miles, go out. So it's adding an extra round trip of 10 miles, but I just knew it was the right call from a safety perspective. So hopefully that won't answer the question. Hopefully it gives you some things to think about when you're making those decisions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just being real with yourself, and you hit that, you already talked about that, but I've dropped weight too before and been like, man, I'm not in a good place right now mentally. Like just kind of cloudy, like I'm a little dehydrated. I'm, maybe not to the point of cramping up, but I'm just like mentally not there. And you also go through on a hard pack out, like it's not it sucks. Like heavyweight is heavyweight. Like it's not all gonna be sunshine and rainbows as you're, you know, packing back to the pickup. But at the end of the day, like just mentally being okay with saying like I'm not in a good spot. Like let's do a little less here and communicating with the people around you and checking on them and seeing how, how they're doing and so on and so forth. So I think that's all really good stuff. Last question here. So let's see, what compromises are toughest to consider when deciding what gear to bring or leave behind?
Um, that's a hard question to answer because what I'll say is the gear I bring is the same 80 to 90% of the time. And so, and 80, 90% of the gear is the same for 80, 90% of the time. So it's really like that last 10%, like kind of per trip of what I'm making decisions on or deciding in between, right? Um, a lot of that sometimes can be clothing based.
Mhm.
So I actually don't use rain gear unless I think I'm really going to need it. A lot of times I'll leave rain gear out. Again, depends on the forecast and it's a personal decision. I'm not afraid to get wet for a little bit if I know that it's not going to be wet for like day on day after day. So things like bringing rain gear, or I personally have like a lighter weight rain gear set versus a heavier set. So it's like, okay, it's going to be wet, but which rain gear? Um, I don't wrestle too much anymore with like other clothing in terms of like, hey, how should I bring this jacket or that jacket, or should I bring this extra layer based on like, am I going to be cold? Because I know myself now and I know my gear well, but that's a common one, especially in the beginning. Is just how much clothing or how warm a clothing. Um, Shelter, if you're someone who has access to a couple different styles of shelters, not everybody does. A lot of guys have one tent and that is what it is and they bring it. But if you start getting into, hey, I have this smaller, lighter tent for better or more fair weather, and then this, bigger, maybe heavier tent that handles bad weather bad, like sometimes you waffle between that. So, again, going back to my point on you only need certain things to backpack hunt. Like there's certain essentials you have to have. And a lot of times I'm not debating on do I need this or I don't, because I can go into a lot of different scenarios with these are the essential things I need. What I'm debating is it this thing or that thing? Is it this shelter or that shelter? Is it this jacket or that jacket? Or again, like, am I going to add rain gear or not? That's just an example, but there's so much that doesn't change, right? Like my sleeping pad, my sleeping bag, my stove, my headlamp, my hunting kill kit in terms of knife and game bags. Like, man, the vast majority of the stuff on my gear list just never changes and I don't think about it. And that's one thing too, is just to go back to gear, as fun as it is to research gear and talk about gear and buy new gear, when you find stuff that you like and that works, freaking run with it, man. And don't be chasing grass is greener. I've been using the same sleeping quilt for 5 years now, right? And I have zero intention to consider anything else, right? So that's the great thing, is once you figure out what works for you, it gets really simple. Like you could come to me at any time of the year and tell me I had to go live in the mountains for a week tomorrow, and I'd be like, no big deal. Because one, I have a list, and that list is important, so I know I'm not going to forget anything. And two, I just have gear that I know and trust and experience on how to use it. So it's like, once you gain that experience and have some good stuff, man, it's really is easy.
That's awesome. That's I'm going to aspire to that because if somebody said I have to go tomorrow to live in the mountains for a week, it would take me a day of ripping through all sorts of different gear closets to figure out where this one thing was. So I definitely need to that's my main takeaway. I want to be like Mark and I want to be able to survive in the mountains on a whim's notice. So
Maybe we'll
no,
end that
awesome.
here.
Yeah. Awesome stuff. I really appreciate your time, Mark, for taking the time this evening with us, and everybody that's still on here, everybody that tuned in. Um, I know you guys learned a lot of good stuff. Look, just looking at the comments, everybody seems like they took a lot of really good stuff away. So again, thank you guys for taking the time. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, EXO. Looking forward to some of those podcasts you were talking about, and season is right around the corner. So I'm excited to get after it and go make some more memories for this year.
Yeah, seriously, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely have to do it again. And good luck on your sheep hunt. Send me some photos.
Will do, man.
Awesome. Good night, guys. Thank you.
Yeah.